So people that say, I'm a jack of all trades, I wear a lot of hats, there are some people who actually blend those hats together, and that makes them a new kind of worker, and they don't know how to express it.
3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Campfire Circle. I'm your host, Tania, and I empower purpose-driven women in building influential personal brands that drive change and raise revenue. We all talk about getting a seat at the table, but why though? Who wants to sit in a stuffy boardroom anyway? Let's reimagine the ultimate space of leadership as a campfire circle, where we share stories that inspire movements, build brave communities to huddle together with for warmth, and where there is always room. Come sit with us. Dr. Sarabeth Berk is the leading expert on hybrid professional identity and a hybrid professional herself. She was featured in Forbes, is a TEDx speaker, the author of More Than My Title, and recipient of a Colorado Inno on Fire Award for her innovative work. Her hybrid title is Creative Disruptor because she works at the intersection of being an artist, researcher, educator, and designer. Sarabeth, welcome to the Campfire Circle podcast. It is so wonderful to have you.
Thank you so much. I can't wait for our conversation.
Likewise, same here. So let's get started. And we'll start at the beginning. What is a hybrid professional and how did you find your hybrid professional identity?
Yeah, definitions are a great starting point. So my rough, clear, succinct definition of a hybrid professional is someone who wears multiple professional identities, who has these multiple sides of themselves, and works at the intersection of those identities. So it's the integration instead of the separation that makes them different. So people that say, I'm a jack of all trades, I wear a lot of hats, there are some people who actually blend those hats together, and that makes them a new kind of worker, and they don't know how to express it. So I see this as an identity because people either fall into one of three categories. I say it's singularity, multiplicity, or hybridity. And singularity is when you have one professional identity. Multiplicity is when you have many, but those are not connected. And hybridity is the third that's been missing. And that's when you have a lot of identities, but you're working simultaneously in between them. So that's my definition. And then how did I get started in this, right? That's part two.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Looking back on my career, I have had a number of jobs in different industries. I've changed roles every 2 to 3 years. And I thought I was an outlier. I thought there was something wrong with me. What I realized looking back is I was trying to figure myself out. I kept getting boxed in and sort of pigeonholed, and that would make me feel frustrated and underutilized. And I was like, but there's more to me. And I'd find this different job where I could use a different part of myself. But that zigzagging nature of, I know I have so much to bring, I don't know where I fit, was sort of haunting me. And what I didn't know that I now know is that was an identity crisis, specifically a professional identity crisis, because career counselors don't help you work through that. They just say, well, what are you passionate about? And what do you want to do? And why do you want to do it? They never say, who are you? So that burning desire for me to figure out who I was eventually became this whole dissertation where I started studying, what is my professional identity? How am I more than my job title? And am I the only person struggling, or have other people figured this out? Let me go ask them. So I did a lot of interviews and observations and came to this realization that many people are more than their job title. That was pretty obvious. And beneath that, people struggle to actually explain the exact professional identity they have. People usually say what they do, which are skills and actions, but they've never thought about what identity are you when you're doing that thing. And then the final part of my revelation was that it's not just that you can do many things underneath one job title. There's another side where you can actually be both things. It's the both and instead of either or, because that's how I felt in my heart and soul, that I was a combination, but yet I did not know how to explain that. So my biggest research finding was you can have a hybrid professional identity. It was a painting by Renee Magritte that showed me this was possible. He had painted a woman and a fish combined into a new creature. It wasn't a mermaid, it was a different thing. And I was like, wait, I'm that. And that's when I found out you can just be this hybrid in your work. So that's a little bit of my backstory.
I love that. I love that, first of all. And thank you for sharing that with me. You know, I bet just like any new concept that comes out, there's probably a lot of things that people initially get wrong with
Yeah.
it, you know, at first. And I can kind of share what my initial kind of wrong thinking was. So I initially found out about your work when you spoke at a clubhouse room with the future. And this was many months ago.
Yeah.
And when I initially heard the term hybrid professional, I almost thought it was like the opposite of niching down. And what I mean by that, it was just doing all the things. You can just do all the things. But what I'm now realizing is in this specificity and intentionality, it's not that we do all the things and say yes to everything. It's that we specialize in something totally unique and that didn't previously actually exist.
Yes.
And so what I love about that is at least if we're in front of the right people and we explain and we're able to explain what we do, we are the only person in the world that can solve their unique problem. Would you agree with that?
Oh, I got chills. Yes, you said that perfectly. Gosh, I mean, this is part personal decoding and part branding of who you are in your professional work. And I think you said it perfectly because we all have many professional identities. Depending on the day I talk to you or the month, you're doing 10 or 20 things in your job. That is normal. But what people haven't stopped to look at is which professional identities are truly you because you use them the most. They're foundation, they're just a core part. And those are the ones that create your hybridity. And we actually have to stop and recognize, I call them your primary professional identities, and all the others are non-primary. You use them once in a while. And to your point, once you can isolate, I say you have to have a minimum of 2 to be a hybrid and a maximum of these 4 primary professional identities, because that is the ingredient list of your recipe that makes you a hybrid. And Venn diagrams are the tool I tell people to use the most, because if you put an identity in each circle of a Venn diagram, you start to wonder, well, what's in the intersection? That's who you really are.
Yes. And I love how you talked about what you do the most leads to that expertise, because I think of our lived experience. And you know what I'm almost thinking of? I'm thinking about when you go to the eye doctors
Mm.
and they have that funny machine where you look through it and you see the letters on the other side. And it's all about combining different lenses. And so they do a certain combination and they say, okay, what's better, A or B? And then they do another combination. And all of a sudden, a certain combination of lenses get put together and you see everything clearly. And the reason that reminds me of this work is because when you get to see the world through all of your multiple professional identities with the right lenses, all of a sudden you see something that nobody else can see because you bring all of your lived experiences into that.
That was beautiful. I'm going to steal that from you. I've never heard it said that way before, but I think you're spot on. It is coming into this alignment of yourself, which is the clarity. So, my primary professional identities are being an artist, educator, researcher, and designer. And it took me a while for me to own that and recognize when I have a job that doesn't let me be one or more of those things, I start to shut down and feel unseen, and it sort of devalues me. But when I have roles that are hybrid jobs that accept and appreciate my hybrid professional identity, all 4 of those identities aren't just present, they are shining in a way that makes me come more alive. And I feel like I'm at my best. And then I'm also bringing this like profound amount of ideas and information and execution to that job. So I think you're spot on.
Right. That's amazing. And let's talk a little bit about how to describe ourselves when we do have these hybrid identities. So, like in your TED talk, you gave the example of a therapist, and I immediately understood what that was, and I said, "Oh my goodness, I need to find one for myself. If there's any therapists out there, let me know. I want to hire you. I need one of you." But what if it's not so cut and dry? And I don't want to make this all about me, but maybe we can use me as an example,
Sure.
right? Because on my LinkedIn title, I have 3 things. And I initially did that to like try to explain all of myself, but I'm realizing now it might be more confusing than helpful.
Right.
So I've got the first primary identity, which is personal brand strategist and ghostwriter, which honestly is kind of 2 things already. And then there's the third, the next one is imposter syndrome dismantler. And to me, what I mean by that is I work on the breaking down of self-limiting beliefs and the societal structures that make historically marginalized people feel like they don't belong. And then the last thing I have, the third thing, is good ancestor, which to me points to like social impact work, right? So we've got personal branding, we've got mental health and justice work, and we've got social impact work. So how the heck do you put that in how do I describe myself?
That is the question. Holy cow.
That's the $1 million question.
That is the $1 million question. And you are so not alone in trying to answer that. That I think is the crux of what millions of people are up against right now. So this is a multi-step process. I have a 5-step workbook that I take people through, and it's also a cohort-based course because I think the collaborative, doing it in real-time process is huge. So I usually start with people like, where are you now? Do you know your professional identities and how do you explain it in sort of that baseline? Because that's even just an awareness check. And often people are like, well, what do you mean? And like that already brings up questions. Then in the second step, we start to go deep. We really brainstorm a list of all of your professional identities. So even though you're using the language you have right now on LinkedIn and certain keywords, we would expand that list and sort of see how comprehensive we can make it before we narrow it back down. There's 4 questions I ask in that stage because it's about how do you validate which ones are you? There's the internal and external validation and the conscious, unconscious sides. So I say, how do you see yourself? Which identities in your work are you? How do others people see you? That's the internal, external. Then the unconscious is who are you when you're in your flow? So you might be like, when I'm in my flow, I'm this investigator or I'm a storyteller. Like those are different words than you're using. Those are just hypothetical. And the last question is when you're consciously aware of your expertise, like who are you? What do you call yourself in your expertise? So those 4 questions kind of become a map that we can triangulate to find, oh, these identity words are more me and these are less. And there's some other things we do there. Then the next step is investigating the intersection. So I would have you draw your Venn diagram from the narrowed list of identities. And we would have to break these down because you're right, some of yours were 2-part. And then the investigating intersection space is a lot of storytelling. People don't know how to answer the question, who are you in your intersections? It is just a great question and then mind-boggling. So I back into it through feelings. We look at times and memories that help give us clues because I really believe when people are in their flow, they're in their hybridity naturally, and we have to turn ourselves on to that awakening. So I use stories as a way to like unpack the intersections. New keywords and themes will emerge from that. So just a quick side story of a woman I worked with recently. Her primary professional identities were being a photographer, some kind of professor, educator, and a journalist. And so it took us a while, but eventually we heard these words of like, she's a perspective taker and a lens shifter, and she was interested in culture. And it was like, okay, those are the qualities happening in her intersection. And so when we get to step 4, which is hybridize, we use those themes, those key words to play with the therapist or play with new titles. And for her, we arrived at cultural lens shifter, which is beautiful because she's like a photojournalist who's also teaching and making sense of culture. And you watch people get the aha moment, like you see them light up and go, oh my gosh, that's me. And so step 5 is the owning it because it's a little bit radical and awkward to try on these new titles. But when people share that, and I have a special framework too of how to give your elevator pitch, because you can't just walk around saying, hi, I'm a cultural lens shifter. Nice to meet you. That's like, you have to say a couple more things. But it really changes how you see yourself, how you present yourself, and the kinds of opportunities that are attracted in your career. So that's a little bit of the process I would love to do if we had more time today.
Absolutely. And that is such a wonderful framework. And I love how you talked about stories, because it seems to me storytelling would be a really great tool in this work, because sometimes our work almost defies language. And so you spoke a little bit about elevator pitch. And my friend Quinn, who I just interviewed, calls that a verbal business card. Would you be open to speaking a little bit about your framework for folks who have a hybrid identity and are not really sure how to answer that age-old question, what do you do?
Yeah, it is the question we are never going to get rid of because it's ingrained in society. And yet it is such an old way of looking at people. So I have an elevator pitch handout and a lot of these other resources on my website. And it's a 3-part process. It takes about 10 seconds to say. So you start with an intro of expressing that you're a hybrid professional or giving your hybrid title. Part 2 is breaking that down into those core professional identities because that's the familiar side people will be able to wrap their head around. And part 3 is giving that 1-sentence definition of what your hybrid title means. And it's almost like your values, like what you stand for when you're in that hybridity. So I'll give mine really fast. Hi, I'm Sarabeth. I call myself a creative disruptor, which means I work at the intersection of being an artist, educator, researcher, and designer, which enables me to create innovation strategies that radically connect people and ideas in new ways. So it gives enough of a structure where people hear something novel that gets their brain intrigued. Then you help sort of anticipate they're going to need more meat. And then you leave them with something where you gave them an entry point to start talking with you. And that's usually where they say, oh, tell me more. I've never heard about that.
Absolutely. I think that, you almost have to say, tell me more when you hear something like that, because you want to know more. It draws you in.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay. So I have a question that came up in my mind, which is a lot of the folks that I work with or that I hear from hesitate to show up in their expertise because they don't necessarily have a degree in the thing. And so with hybrid professionals, you definitely don't have a degree in the thing because the thing doesn't exist yet. You would probably become the first founding dean of the school of that thing. So, what would you say to individuals who feel like they can't show up as the expert that they are in their hybrid professional expertise unless they get all of the degrees for that thing or all of the accreditation certificates, licenses? Like, what makes up our professional expertise or our capital?
Yes, career capital is a great way for it. I like this debate a lot. I've been in other clubhouse rooms on this too. What is the value of a degree today? So we're going into different territory. Essentially, I think the way that you demonstrate and show you can do something helps validate you can truly do it. So I call myself a creative disruptor. I haven't met anybody else with that hybrid job title, but I still have to validate, substantiate, demonstrate I am that. If I just go around bragging it with no background in it, people will go, ha, like that's kind of cute, but let's try again. So I definitely think the stories that you know of yourself that tie to your hybrid identity are what give you that evidence to stand on. But also it's that reputation building, right? So I actually almost always now introduce myself as, hi, I'm Sarah Beth. I'm a creative disruptor. If I have a formal job title, because I often work in a company where I get to be my hybrid professional identity, I'll use my formal title, director of growth, and call myself a creative disruptor because that's how I see myself. So it's sort of doing this combination of just introductions when you meet people where you can have whatever degree you have, but it's how you map what you do to who you say you are. And then they need to see it. So for me, it's partially the experience, it's partially that reputation building, and it's partially, if you do have a degree, how does it fit into the picture? But you're right, you'll never have a degree in your hybridity because you designed and created it.
Exactly. It's yours. And I love what you said earlier, and even just now about the identity. It's about the who, right? And we all know and love the concept of the why, popularized by Simon Sinek. And then I think that's kind of like our vision. And then we talk about the how, which is kind of like our mission. But I love your work because it focuses on the who, right? Who are we? Or who do we need to lean into more of ourselves to become the person that we are? So what questions should we ask ourselves that maybe we aren't already asking to come up with that hybrid professional identity?
Oh, yeah. The who is a big question because I think it's who are you when you're following your passion and purpose, the why and what you love to do. So the questions we need to ask ourselves, first of all, what language are you using about yourself currently? The language you speak about yourself is the language other people are going to use back to you. So I was called a design thinking guru by my peers. So I started using that, but that didn't feel right to me. I had to stop using that language so they would stop using it. So notice the language you're using. Some people on their LinkedIn headers have really generic things like, I'm a strategist, coach, author, graphic designer. And those are just very broad labels. So notice the current professional identities you're using. Then the next question is, well, what is my professional identity? How do I see myself? And if you don't know what that is, then that's a great starting point of personal growth, personal development, doing some brainstorms. I have a whole professional identity word list just to jumpstart people and use that as a space to get curious and to research and even ask others for ideas and support. So I think those would be my two first starting points. And then look at really interesting titles other people are using to help inspire your own. Because we mentioned the Therapist and the Cultural Lens Shifter. I just found a company called People Rocket, and they are like an innovation strategy group on the About page where they have all the team profiles. Every person in that team has a hybrid title. And it's so cool and inspiring to see that an entire company can break the mold on traditional job titles. So that's where I'd start.
I have a question about that. So there's an entire company where every title for every person leans into their hybrid professional identity. So how would you explore upward career ladder movement, or is that not even a thing anymore? Like, does the career ladder no longer exist? Tell me your thoughts.
Have you followed a career ladder? I don't think I have. I,
No.
yeah. I I meet most people. I'm not saying the career ladder is totally dead, although I think it's largely going that direction. I think it's a non-linear way of us growing and developing. And we are supposedly going to have like 40 or 50 years of a career, like between lifespan and how long people are alive. So in 40 to 50 years, imagine you are going to have multiple jobs and second and third careers. And if we can't reimagine ourselves, then we're going to get stuck. So, this new tool set we need is the ability to reinvent ourselves. And that means letting go of old identities and embracing new ones, as well as reintegrating, taking identities we had that are still part of us and combining them with others to keep becoming the best version of ourselves. And I think that takes us in a lot of different directions. That means the portfolio career or poly work or a gig career. There's just all these new terms for how careers are evolving.
And now is a really great time to talk about this work because, everybody's throwing around the term the great resignation, but you're right. It's a great reinvention. And almost on a daily basis, people are reaching out to me because they know I recently launched into entrepreneurship and kind of asking about that. And so I guess I have a question around how would somebody know if it's time to start exploring a career change or launching a new business or doing something to really maximize the gifts that they have that are now going unexplored?
Oh, yeah. Well, first of all, I think the headlines all over the news are people are waking up that their job doesn't match their values. They want more happiness. They want more sort of a sense of completion and fulfillment in their work. So, anytime you are facing a challenge, going through some kind of crisis, or reevaluating your own values and belief system, you are going to be changing your identity. They just go hand in hand. So, I think if you are feeling like you don't belong, you're questioning why you fit in something, you wonder what you want to do next. These are also moments to stop and say, well, who am I now? Who am I becoming? And who do I want to be? And doing this identity work is part of sort of naming and re envisioning the next you. And these are the tools we've been missing. When you look at professional development, career development, they don't have identity development baked in. It's sort of a happenstance. Instead, we do all these personality profiles and skills assessments, which are interesting and important. But at the end of the day, five people could all have the same skill sets and all call themselves something different. So if we don't also talk about identity, we are missing a large part of us understanding what we're trying to do next.
That's such a great point. And this is so interesting, right? The women I tend to work with for so long, when we start to talk about personal branding, there's a little bit, or talking about ourselves or coming up with our identity or focusing inwards instead of externally on everybody else. There's a discomfort there or a feeling like this work is selfish or there's an unlearning that needs to go on of unlearning all the things that we grew up with, like, it's not about us, or to shrink away from the light. And so do you ever see that being a barrier or an objection in this work when you work with people?
Yeah. I, so some of the background of the theory that I use to understand hybrid professional identity is one scholar I really refer to as Kegan, and he has this evolution of consciousness. And he said there's 5 orders of consciousness people develop through, and most people get to stage 3. Stage 3 is where we start to see ourselves the way the world sees us. So I am who you tell me I am. And most people are okay with that and they don't question it. But when you start to pull out and go, but what if I'm not who you tell me I am? Then we start to get into these other levels. So level 4 is where you start to have more self-authorship, more self-autonomy. You see systems and you go, well, I want to be this kind of person in this system. And level 5 is where you see things and you know how to break the rules, but be yourself and sort of play in and out and be who you want to be within that. That is very advanced and sophisticated. We are not taught how to do these things. People usually just sort of end up there, but it's not like a guided process. This literature is even hard to find, I think. So it takes sitting with people and helping them wake up to themselves by asking these really reflective questions. When I meet people, the questions I ask them, they have never been asked before. I mean, that first question I almost open every workshop with this is, what is your professional identity? Answer that. And I get people saying, oh, I do marketing and I do sales. I work in science. I'm part of a financial planning group. None of those were identity words. Those were all industries and skills. So we have to even just understand that part of professional identity. So the more coaching I would recommend as you're helping people with branding and sort of imposter syndrome or the shrinking violet is helping people see themselves and using some of this reflective energy to get them to decide who they are without the labels that have been put upon them.
I sure wish I had learned that in school, right? I wish we had spent more time on that growing up instead of things like y equals mx plus b, right? Because nothing is linear anyway anymore. So I ask every guest this question because, and I know you're a visionary. So what would happen if everybody in the world could lean into their hybrid professional identities and fully shine for all of their authentic gifts and become more of themselves? Like, how would the world change?
Wow, I love that's huge. I felt that one in my body. This process would help people self-actualize. I mean, this is truly part of Maslow's and all these taxonomies of self-development, self-improvement. When you know thyself, then you have more awareness of who you are in the world and you can better articulate it, communicate it, and help people see your gifts. So if you don't have this self understanding and self knowledge, how are you ever supposed to achieve your full potential and live that in the world? I think this tool is really about breaking down paradigms of your identity specifically in your work so you can do the biggest work you are destined to do.
I absolutely love that. And the world needs that, right? The world needs us and all of our true gifts shining as they should. So I have one last question for you. It's kind of a fun one. And it's about a hybrid identity that you and I share. It's not a professional one, but when I read it in your Clubhouse bio, I said, oh my goodness, I need to become her friend. And that identity is a Pisces, dreamer, visionary, and mini schnauzer mom.
Yes.
And I said, yeah, that is the absolute best. So I want to hear, tell me about your mini schnauzer, because I have one and he's the best.
My mini schnauzer is sleeping right next to me on the little couch I have in my room. He has been my best friend for 10 years and he has so much personality. I call him a sheriff is his nickname because he's always sheriffing. I can tell that you understand.
I'm freaking out right now. We have a little tag for him that says Sheriff Gary.
No. That is too good. I can't believe that. It's true. That is their personality. And he's my protector. but he has just taught me a lot about, that open-hearted love, that it's, it doesn't matter what kind of day I'm having. So I love dogs. I'm so glad you have a schnauzer.
Oh, I'm right there with you. Gary is one of my biggest mentors because he's such a protector. You're right. And anytime he sees something that might be a threat, which nothing is, right? He uses his voice. He uses his gifts of of protectiveness. And so I think we can all learn from our dogs and our mini schnauzers.
That's awesome.
So,
I love that you have Sheriff Gary. My dog is Jax, and he is,
amazing.
my mom calls him Cracker Jacks, but yeah, he has all kinds of nicknames.
Absolutely amazing. Well, so how can people find you and work with you?
Yeah, morethanmytitle.com is my website. My book is also More Than My Title. I am offering more of these cohort-based workshops where it's a group of people and we go through this journey together, because I see so much impact when people get to bounce off their identity words and their stories in a group, because even just one-on-one, I can hear so much, but other people bring other vocabulary that's like, oh yeah, that's an even better word. So I'm really enjoying doing the cohort process. And then I'm all on Clubhouse and different spaces. I have a newsletter I send every week with more research and writing, because there's things all the time I'm coming, into my mind and bringing back out. So More Than My Title is the best way to find me.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, I definitely follow you and get inspired and think about things in a different way every time I read them. Everybody follows Sarabeth. And really, thank you so much for taking the time to have this chat with us. I loved our time together as two fellow Pisces. I knew this was going to be great. So thanks for showing up.
Tania, I loved it too. And maybe you and I can work on your hybrid title in the future, and we'll do like a second part 2 on this.
Oh, I would love that. That would be
That'd be
amazing. That would be amazing.
Okay.
Perfect. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
What'd you think? Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, or even better, reach out and let me know through lumosmarketing.co. Yes, that's Lumos, as in the illumination spell from Harry Potter. Because when you shine, magical things happen. You can get social with me on LinkedIn, and of course, check out the show notes to stay in touch with our guests. Let's talk soon.